It's too late for PWG. We are the champions. Where's my belt? I don't need a goddamn belt. I made this place. I'm the champion of the universe.
Welcome to episode 2 of the Glorious Wrestling Podcast, fresh off one of the biggest Raw main events, or as Michael Cole would say, in his 20 years in professional wrestling, with Kevin Owens becoming the Galactic Champion of the Universe, Triple H turning on Seth Rollins, and everything else going down. Dem, what did you make of all of it? Are you ready to go?
Nick, I am ready for it. I am pumped and ready to go after Kevin Owens did the job that we all expected him. We were all hoping he would do and expecting him to do eventually, and he did it nice and early.
It was absolutely amazing. And I think the best bit was, as was revealed, I think by Dave Meltzer or someone, one of those dirt sheets, that Kevin Owens did not know that Triple H was going to cause the ending of the match. He knew that he was going to win the title, but he didn't know how. Wasn't told the ending of the match. I think only Seth knew going into the match, which I think is fantastic because, man, his reaction was genuine. And I know earlier in the week you were messaging me saying, oh, his reaction was fantastic. Like, Owen seemed so genuine. But, like, no, he was genuine because he did not know that was going to happen.
Yeah, that he wasn't aware that he was going to win the title like that. And it was a nice way. We'll talk about it more a bit later, but it was just a nice way to bring back Triple H and create an eventful storyline, and really, that's catapulted Raw into equal contention with SmackDown after a shaky first few weeks.
Yeah, it needed to make Raw must-watch. That's what they needed to accomplish this week. With Balor going out, they needed to make Raw must-watch to compete with the ultra-consistent show that is SmackDown Live. And they've done that, which is fantastic. And we'll talk more about Owens and Seth later in our Twitter questions, because we've got a couple of them. But I think the main question now is Seth Rollins versus Triple H. When does the match happen?
I think you can't wait till WrestleMania.
No.
That's too far away. It'll happen at the Royal Rumble. Maybe that will be the first one. I'm not sure. I wonder if Survivor Series is potentially one that, like the first one, Survivor Series, which is usually November.
Yeah, it's still a few months away, so they can build.
So they can build to that. As you said, we'll discuss it a bit more later. I think that's the feud, that's the marquee feud that will happen, and at WrestleMania, it will result in Seth Rollins going over.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to have Triple H, Seth Rollins compete twice. Have Triple H win the first match, have the first match for the rights to use the pedigree. Have Triple H win that because it's his move.
Yep.
Then have Seth win at WrestleMania. I don't know how you would build that next 6 months.
We could see Phoenix Splash finally.
Yeah, well, yeah, he'll need to come up with something else, won't he? But so I think you have Seth Triple H at Survivor Series, and then you have between Survivor Series and WrestleMania to build Seth into the biggest babyface on the roster.
Yep.
My thoughts on that, though, is the fact that they wanted to do that match at WrestleMania 32. They clearly had this long-term plan to turn Seth Rollins face and turn Triple H on him. My thoughts on that is that they were originally going to do that with Finn Balor. And they were going to have Finn Balor turn heel, probably about the Royal Rumble. I mean, we know that Balor was supposed to take on Owens at Clash of Champions and then Owens and Jericho at the pay-per-view after that. So we know they wanted to keep the title on Balor for a while. And what this means is they're possibly building to this exact storyline, because they didn't come up with this in a couple of weeks. No. This was copy and paste what they wanted to do at the end.
It had to be.
Yeah, what they wanted to do at the end of the year. Except they had to do it now to make Raw relevant because it's just getting smashed by SmackDown. So they've done this big WrestleMania feud now, and obviously they're going to have to go with Seth and Triple H a bit earlier. Owens is Triple H's guy instead of Balor being the heel guy who works under Triple H. What are your thoughts on Balor potentially being Triple H's guy?
Well, I disagree with that. I don't think Balor would have made the heel turn just to be Triple H's guy. I think either way, I don't think Owens is Triple H's guy now either. I think this is just a nice way to get Rollins, to screw Rollins over and to set up the feud with Triple H. I think you're right. It would have been later on had Balor not been injured, but the current timing isn't too bad, and it was just fantastic to see. The other thing with Balor, he would have turned heel eventually, and the crucial thing to know is that over the past month, Gallows and Anderson have had BC on their clothing. I think that was starting to get a little bit of Balor Club into the minds of viewers at home. So I don't agree with you necessarily that Balor would have been Triple H's guy, but who knows now? Unfortunately, he's out for 6 months. So.
That's the most shattering bit, is Balor probably would have been their champion, probably going to a WrestleMania. Now that's all been taken away from him. And, maybe they could have done both. They could have had Triple H and Balor as, like, this unit, and then had the club as almost their J&J security, except with a lot more credibility.
Yes.
That would have been a way they could have done it. I guess that means the following questions are, what's next for Roman Reigns. You'd assume he'd go back into the feud with Rusev.
You'd hope so. It's an entertaining feud and it has the potential to be really good.
Yeah, I totally agree. But he got pedigreed by Triple H, costing him the Universal title. I mean, it makes sense for Triple H to do it, considering, Roman speared his wife at WrestleMania.
Yeah, that wasn't a great image.
No, I don't think so either. But, you would assume that Roman isn't just going to say, he's too busy with Seth, I'll just go back to Rusev over here. Logically, you would assume Roman would have some follow-up there. And I guess the other one is what to make of the rest of Monday Night Raw. Because it was a good show. The main event was fantastic. But nothing much really happened outside of that. The tag team and women's title feuds went nowhere. Titus and Darren, who cares? You had the squash matches. You had Neville and Jericho putting on a great match. Shazami having his own squash match. But there wasn't really much that happened outside of the main event. And I think that's the issue with Raw. Is SmackDown is a consistent show from start to finish. Raw is too spiky and too up and down. What did you make of, excluding the main event? What did you make of the rest of Raw?
Well, bits of it were entertaining. Seeing the New Day and Bayley.
That was fantastic.
That was entertaining, and seeing Dana Brooke try and do the too sweet with Gallows and Anderson was downright embarrassing. I just thought, I agree with you there. The main event saved it and made it look like a good show when realistically it probably wasn't. It was getting smashed by SmackDown as usual until the final bit where, to be honest though, Kevin Owens winning the title makes up for everything.
Yep.
And that's how it sticks in my mind. I know, everyone's marking out all over the place, seeing Kevin Owens hold the title, seeing what it meant to him, but seeing arguably the best guy in the company holding the main title now, the possibilities are endless.
Exactly, and if you were giving the points this week between Raw and SmackDown, you'd probably give it to Raw just because of its amazing main event.
The shock factor.
Yeah, SmackDown was a good show again. Nothing really special happened. It was kind of like a C plus B across the board. But SmackDown has that consistency, and Raw needs to find that with its 3 hours, and that'll happen with the Cruiserweight division, and we'll talk a lot more about the Cruiserweight division in our 4 issues. We have a really big point about that. But I guess the final point when it comes to this whole thing is it's amazing that the WWE is finally getting behind fresh talent at the top of the card. You had Balor as the Universal Champion, you have Ambrose as the WWE Champion, Owens now at the top of Raw, and Styles probably soon to be the WWE Champion. They're getting behind all this new talent at the top of the card, which is something fans have been complaining about for years. I mean, you had 2009 to 2010 and all that, where you had just Triple H and Cena and Orton, and nobody fresh was getting an opportunity. And now you have this time where the top of the card is basically all guys who deserve to be there and are fan favourites and haven't been there in the past.
Yep, and it's fantastic to see old mate Vinnie Mac backing in Triple H.
Yeah, exactly, because it's his way that this is.
Yep.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to SmackDown side of things, and I guess the place to start is Alberto Del Rio choosing to leave the company. Does anyone really care about that?
He had a bit of momentum coming back when he came back, didn't he? He beat John Cena for the United States title with that memorable Zeb Coulter by his side, but I guess the biggest problem with him leaving is Paige, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Paige is far more important to the WWE than Alberto Del Rio is. She's incredibly important to the Raw women's roster. And her spending this 30-day suspension right now is why Bayley is in the main event picture right now. Because she's out of the picture, Sasha's out of the picture. And you got to remember, Paige is 23 or 22. She's about as young as anyone on the roster. So Paige has such a big future in the WWE that her not being there now and her leaving without Del Rio would be shattering, because she deserves to be in the main event of the Women's Championship scene, and she will be there for a long time. She said it herself that she wants to be a Hall of Famer, and she has a Hall of Fame caliber career ahead of her. But if she throws that all away for Del Rio, that would be a massive problem, especially with her having this suspension and there being rumors about her not being mentally right with the company right now. You just got to hope that Paige stays with the company.
And Del Rio's sort of volatility in terms of, if something doesn't go his way, obviously it's bad. If they promised him a main event push and he didn't get it, it's understandable why he wants to leave. And you just feel that Paige, her flexibility in being a face and a heel and her importance to the roster, you just hope that Del Rio can go to, say, TNA and have his own little career there and Paige stays with the WWE. But at the moment, it doesn't look great.
I think the thing is, Del Rio has no reason to complain about not getting a main event push. He didn't deserve one.
He didn't, no.
He was hot for about a week. He had that amazing match, or not amazing, but that amazing comeback with Cena.
Yep.
Then he had a good match the week after that. The Survivor Series WWE Championship tournament. And then it was 14 days and he was flat. He was gone. He did not deserve a main event push. He currently deserves to be in his spot in the company, which is in the same spot that Sheamus is in. And Sheamus is grinning and bearing it and doing the best he can with it. But Del Rio deserves... I honestly have no issue with him leaving. outside of the depth issues it causes SmackDown, he can go for all I care.
Yep, and you hope that it leads to Cesaro shifting across to SmackDown, given there's a spot open.
Yeah, well, there's many spots open on SmackDown's roster. Speaking of SmackDown, the final bit we're going to talk about before we get into our Book City, which we're moving up a bit further up.
Due to popular demand,
and the fact that last week, you booked the Tag Team Championship tournament, you got your bit right. I booked the Miz and Ziggler thing, I got my bit right. So we're 1-1 at the moment. We're going to make it a bit harder this week, though, a bit more long term. We don't know what feuds we're going to be booking, but it should be interesting there. So before we get into Book City this week, we're going to talk about the Backlash card. And I guess we know that Ambrose versus Styles for the WWE Championship. I think we both expect Styles to lead with the title.
Yep.
The other big ones are the Six-Pack Women's Championship match, which is humming along nicely and needs some more mic time, I think. Your thoughts on that match?
Yeah, no, I think you're right, but I think in the end, probably Nikki Bella.
That would be a shame, but I guess, yeah. I don't know if you can go straight to Becky.
You need a little bit of prestige first with someone that held a title
I think
previously.
I think it's more there is no really other option other than Nikki, because if you put the title straight on Becky, like Becky winning the title is the big yay moment, and that needs to happen in a singles match, I would assume.
Yes.
And I guess the other big match on the card, Randy Orton taking on Bray Wyatt. And that feud's humming along nicely as well. I think they both have good chemistry together. It's a good feud because you've got two guys who are sort of that demented, sort of love sadistic side of things. And I honestly think Bray has to go over in this feud. What do you think?
I don't think he will because Randy Orton got beaten the hell out of Brock Lesnar, and they would have had to have promised him a couple of feud wins for him to get split open.
Yep.
His head torn open by Brock Lesnar. I think they need to... Well, I don't like Bray Wyatt constantly losing. I think Randy Orton has to go over in the feud.
I can see this being like a 3-match card. You can almost have Orton winning the first one, Bray winning the last two. Something like that. Just this has to carry SmackDown until Survivor Series, really, because there just isn't much depth in SmackDown. And so now we'll be moving into Book City, which is the part of the show where I will give Dem a feud, and he will give me a feud, and we will have to book them off the top of our heads. So I have no idea what he's going to give me, and he has no idea what I'm about to give him, and he's going to go first, because last week he got the lesser grade. It was alright. I mean, you got the feud right.
No, I thought I did pretty well.
Yeah, but you didn't, articulate it as well as... So you got a chance to redeem yourself.
My eloquence wasn't great, but, I mean, Heath Slater and Rhino are always going to beat the headbangers, so...
Yeah, we will... I'll have to take half a point off you, because you didn't say they were going to face the headbangers. You didn't predict that, so... That's your own.
It's a bit obvious, so
yeah.
Apologise for that.
You missed that one. So, the feud you're going to be booking this week is the NXT Women's Championship feud to take place between now and the next NXT TakeOver. So what the filler feud is between right now and the NXT event in Australia in December.
Well, we don't know. It's definitely an Australia one.
I feel like
a takeover might be around Survivor Series before that. But so this is a little bit of a stitch up. It's 2 weeks in a row you've given me something considerably harder than what I'm giving you. I guess I'm looking after you a bit, but you're just young boy Nick, so we'll get through. You were right. It has to be a filler feud for Asuka because she's the only genuinely good talent at the moment in terms of championship material, and she is the champion. Aaliyah, Billie Kay, Ember Moon, these are the names of people that just, they're not genuine contenders. I think we want Aussie representation. I think Billie Kay will be the one to have a filler feud with Asuka. They could keep Asuka off TV for a month, which it'd be an interesting thing to do and get her to come back.
She's already been announced for NXT next week.
She's already been announced for NXT next week, so I'll just keep quiet about that one. I think Billie Kay will be the one. Over the past month, she's had a little bit of momentum. I know she lost to Ember Moon. Ember Moon's not ready. She's only had one match, so she can't go straight into the feud, regardless of what promo she has with Bayley. Billie Kay is a heel, so that's a tick. She's had a lot of TV time over the past 4 to 6 weeks, which is a tick. And she has been at NXT for a while, which pretty much crosses everyone else off. I mean, I know Peyton Royce has been there for a while.
I think Peyton is better than Billie.
I do agree, but Peyton hasn't been on TV for a couple of months. So I think it has to be Billie Kay. And surprisingly, I think Asuka will win.
Yeah, but will Asuka lose this year? I can't see her... she's still undefeated at NXT. I can't see her losing.
No, she's not going to lose anytime soon. And the only person currently on the women's roster that she could lose to in order to send her up will be Ember Moon.
Yep.
And that will likely be at some stage in the first few months of 2017.
Yep. Keep your eye on Nikki Glenncross too. She is a star. She's basically Becky Lynch 2.0.
And a lot of charisma.
a lot. She is fantastic. So that was pretty good. I'll give you a B plus for that one. There isn't really much to go with in terms of Asuka feuds. I think we both know that it'll be Asuka versus Ember Moon at like the next takeover, whenever that is. But the filler feud, I'll give you a B plus for that. That's good effort.
Yes.
Okay.
I agree.
Now your turn.
Yeah, well, sticking with NXT, I'm a nice guy, so with NXT, we're going to go with Shinsuke Nakamura post Joe.
Okay, that's an interesting one because I get the feeling we'll see Joe Nakamura at the next takeover, a Joe's obvious rematch. Joe's too big a star to just like shove him aside after losing the title. And my guess is that the next takeover will be either in Australia or there'll be one in between. I guess we're talking Shinsuke Nakamura versus a new challenger probably by the end of the year. And my guess for that would be the man whom this podcast is completely based around.
The glorious one.
The glorious one, Bobby Roode. He is the guy who I believe will be the next challenger to Shinsuke Nakamura. And I think you can base that simply around the fact that there really isn't another main event heel guy in NXT right now. And Bobby Roode is going to be a megastar by the end of the year. I would like to see them make him a hateable heel, though. Right now, he's loved by the crowd. They love singing his theme. They love all of that. But I don't want that. I want them to have guys in the crowd be pulled out and replaced with guys in suits. Have Tom Phillips thrown out of the commentary desk and replaced by a guy who's talking about, like, advertisements and, like, throwing out all these ads and throwing the ad breaks every 5 minutes and really making the product struggle. I want Bobby Roode to turn NXT into, like, a glorified commercial to make money and like go above William Regal and have Regal escorted out of the building and Bobby Roode installed as the new general manager. I want, the perception that the IWC has of Vince McMahon, how he like corporatizes the product, makes it PG, does everything through the board and doesn't care about wrestling fans, cares about making money. I want the personification of that put into Bobby Roode. And then by the time he gets to the NXT championship, have him go over Shinsuke Nakamura some way, like maybe not even necessarily clean, just have him win the title and you can build him up as this mega heel who is just the glorious one who rules NXT with an iron fist, and then you're going to have someone come up from underneath to challenge him from there. But yeah, I honestly think that Bobby Roode is the next guy to challenge.
And this is, of course, after a feud with Ty Dillinger, as I said on last week's podcast, which will be the glorious one versus the Perfect 10. I disagree. I think Austin Aries or Hideo Itami are the ones that need to go with Nakamura first, because I don't think Nakamura can win the title off Joe, successfully retain, and then that's really where the title the reign sort of commences.
Yeah.
I don't think he can lose the next one to Bobby Roode, because Bobby Roode has to break the winning streak of Shinsuke Nakamura as part of it. And I think he needs to have... It's not a filler feud because Austin Aries or Itami are genuine threats and they'd put on a hell of a match. But I think Bobby Roode will get there eventually. I think it needs to be sometime 2017.
I think we'll see Austin Aries on the main roster by the end of the year. That's sort of why I didn't consider him.
Yep.
And you're definitely right. We'll see Nakamura versus Itami at some stage. That's just a match that has to happen. I think we might even see that as sort of like a Nakamura Balor style NXT main event 20-minute match rather than like a full-blown takeover match. I guess it depends on how many takeovers are between now and the end of the year. But yeah, I mean, I think Itami and Bobby Roode are the two obvious choices for NXT to go with in terms of Nakamura's opponents.
I'll give you a B+ too.
Oh, well, thank you. That's very nice. So I guess that's our booking for NXT for the next year. You can just write those down, and I guess they're spoilers, sorry, because they're gonna happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, predictions are always correct.
We're 1 from 1. Like, that's about as much as you can hope for. Each, yeah, exactly. 1 from 1 each. Okay, so now we're going to get into some Twitter questions. We've got 2 to go through today. They're basically the same, though, so...
Can you believe we've got 2 questions?
I'm genuinely surprised we have 2 questions. Anyway, so Alex Mull FP on Twitter asks, boys, your thoughts on Triple H Owens angle going forward? Where do you see the booking going? And the other question, which is pretty similar, from Anthony Wingard, says, feel free to answer in the podcast. Does Triple H turning on Seth make Seth a face? And does it make KO a face? So basically, I guess we're discussing KO and Seth, what it means for them.
Yep. I think neither will be faces per se. Seth Rollins, I think, over the next month or so, will build towards a face, but it won't be a typical face. It will be, I would like to call it man on a mission face, where he isn't pandering to the crowd, he isn't doing it for the fans, he is attacking Triple H and attacking other heels because he's on a mission to beat Triple H, to get retribution for costing him the WWE Universal title.
Yeah, I have to agree. They can't turn Seth face straight away. I think especially because Owens doesn't have a logical first challenger.
No.
Obviously, you got like that feud with Jericho that sort of might be bubbling away.
Yes.
That's sort of
Kevin and Chris, best tag team in the world.
until they when they break up, I want like a full vignette of just like black and white with sad music about they're breaking up, because that'll eventually happen. Obviously, I think we might see something like Owens.
Next month.
I think we might see. I honestly would like to see Sami Zayn challenge Owens straight up, be like, "I've got a pinfall victory over you." Rollins will be busy doing. But that's the thing. Owens and Rollins both don't have logical opponents, so you think they'll stick them together. But then what happens? Does like Triple H screw Rollins again?
I think something like that has to happen, because I think at the moment, it's a little off topic, but Sami Zayn is being booked like Kevin Owens was a couple of months ago, where Kevin Owens was losing matches, then in just crappy little feud. You know, he was with, Jericho and him are fantastic, but realistically, that's just a nothing feud with Enzo and Cass. And it would be amazing to see Sami Zayn versus Kevin Owens at WrestleMania for the title or for number one contendership. Oh, something like that.
I would like to see Survivor Series this year in Canada. You got Zayn versus Owens versus Jericho for the title. Three Canadians. I think it books itself. It allows Seth to go and do his own thing. But if we're answering the question, I don't think either of us think that KO is a face.
Nope.
No, he's just a prize-fighting heel who saw an opportunity and took it, and will ride along with that. We'll see Seth probably turn face. Probably by Survivor Series, he'll be a full-blown face.
At latest.
At latest, yeah. I mean, it won't happen next week on Raw. You would hope. You think they would just back off and take the time with this?
Man on a mission.
Almost like, I think the best way to describe Seth Rollins' face turn would be CM Punk post WrestleMania 29. Yeah, when he came back and Paul Heyman turned on him. Have it almost a similar sort of way where Seth isn't the baby face. He's just a guy trying to take down Triple H in the same way that Punk was going after Lesnar. So it's not your traditional face. He's just this badass guy going after the villain in the story, which is Paul Heyman, Triple H.
Which suits his current positioning, and then he can become the baby face, for the roster. And yeah, so thanks for the questions, fellas, and keep them coming.
Yep, we're happy to answer any questions you guys have in detail. We have plenty of time on this podcast, so neither of us really have much lives. So we're happy to answer any questions that you guys want to send in.
That's true.
You can follow us on Twitter at GloriousWP. Now we're going to move into our 4 issues, and then you're starting us off with the Cruiserweight division.
Yes, my issue is whether there are too many people rostered to be on the Cruiserweight division. We have the likes of last week, so not this week yet, but last week there was Rich Swann, TJ Perkins, Brian Kendrick, and Noam Dar were announced. 4. And then there's already Neville there, potentially Sami Zayn if they bump it up 20 pounds. The
Sin Cara.
Cruiserweight division. Yep, and Sin Cara. So automatically say at most there were 6 already there. Now they've recently announced Tommaso Ciampa and Johnny Gargano. There will be also Cedric Alexander, of course. Rich Swann was already mentioned. There was Lindsay Dorado and Gran Metalik will also be there.
Akira Tozawa is another possibility.
That's about 10. That's at least 10 names. Yep. And I think there are too many. I love seeing the Cruiserweights wrestle, and it's fantastic to see, but wouldn't it be great to see some of them on NXT? Wouldn't it be great to have maybe at most 6 or 7 on the main roster on Raw, and that way everyone gets a bit of time?
I think you're right, because it's a 3-hour show, but then there's not going to be more than 3 or 4 Cruiserweights on an average Raw. You're not going to get more than one Cruiserweight division storyline. It's just going to be the title. And you assume Neville will be the champion, which means only one of those Cruiserweight guys is going to get an opportunity. And that's a really good point, because I'm thinking it has sort of the smell of the Divas Revolution in its initial stages.
That's a good point.
Because you had 9 women being pushed at the same time, and everyone was like, okay, none of these people have characters. I don't know who to cheer for. I don't know who to boo. It's going to be a similar situation here, because you're introducing all of these guys at once. They're going to have to build their own characters. You're going to need squash matches for them. And how are you going to build 10 characters at once? I mean, they're not all Brian Kendrick who have pasts with the WWE Universe. Yeah, I honestly think that the other issue is, you look at SmackDown right now, and it has no depth. You have guys like Cruz and Corbin being used in the top feuds with Ambrose and Styles, and then you have guys like Cesaro and Sheamus and Sami Zayn and Chris Jericho, and these guys working mid-card or undercard feuds that mean nothing on Raw. Well, you have guys like Cruz and Corbin on SmackDown filling these top spots, It really should be the other way around. So, like, it really doesn't make much sense for all of this influx of talent to go to Raw. Because you have guys like Noam Dar, you have guys like Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa, who will all be fantastic outside of the Cruiserweight division. You have Brian Kendrick, who has a natural link to Daniel Bryan on SmackDown. You have all of these guys who will be great in the Cruiserweight division, but can do so much more. Like, I'd like to see Gargano and Ciampa go to SmackDown as a tag team. You can't waste all of this talent in one division because, as you said, the issue is they're not all going to get screen time.
No, and I just feel that that's something that needs to be addressed quickly, and there's every chance they're going to have more cruiserweights. So how is the crowd meant to form a relationship and a like for these guys on the roster? If there are 12 of them, there could only be 2 matches maximum for the cruiserweight division.
Exactly, and you can't build them up in some kind of 16-man tournament because, newsflash, they're already doing that, and the mainstream crowd isn't going to watch the CWC, so they're going to be starting fresh. I'd like to see Cedric Alexander as a singles on SmackDown. We both see him as a main eventer.
He's an absolute star.
So there you go. There's our first of our 4 topics for this week. My first one is regarding Big Cass. And we saw him in the main event of Raw this week. We saw how well he stood up and he fit in perfectly. He held his own. He was a bit slow, but I guess you can expect that for someone who's as big as he is.
7 feet tall.
Can't teach that. But you look at guys like Roman, who is massive, but he's a freak athlete who can work at that speed. Cass is a different sort of performer. My issue with Cass isn't so much his fault. I'm just worried. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm worried that he's going to be Roman Reigns 2.0. I'm worried that they're going to... It won't happen in the next month. It won't happen by the end of the year even. It could even be next year where they split him and Enzo up and Cass is by himself and all of a sudden he's getting the mega push where he can't be beaten in singles competition. He's getting pushed towards titles and the crowd will be like, hang on, this is just Roman Reigns all over again. And there will be wrestling fans that will make that connection because this is what wrestling fans do. They see something, they like it. A few months later, they're like, yeah, I'm sick of that. It's like... A lot of wrestling fans are sick of Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose. I don't get it personally, but it's a thing with wrestling fans.
And the CM Punk chants in 2016.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of those. But, Big Cass is a star. But if they don't learn from their mistakes with Roman Reigns and they push him straight to the top. If you look at Roman when he came in, he separated straight from the Shield and went straight to the main event title picture. There was no build-up. And I'm worried that they'll do the same thing with Cass once they split him from Enzo. Right now, it doesn't count. Because he's still with Enzo, he's still technically a tag team wrestler. So once they split him, that's when you have to keep an eye on it. So my personal worry is that Big Cass will be rejected by the fans in the same way Roman Reigns was. What do you think about that?
I think, it depends. If he has a new gimmick where he shrinks to 6'8" and says that you can actually teach height, I think that could be effective. But I don't know if he will have that sort of impact, only because he's quite good on the mic. He's improved. Enzo's helped him a lot, and he has that presence where you just assume because he's a tall guy that he can be dominant within reason. Roman Reigns is shorter than Dean Ambrose,
yeah,
and they've built him up to be a beast, whereas I think Big Cass is sort of that likeable face where the crowd is on his side, regardless. I know they all chant for Enzo and all that sort of thing, but he's a likeable sort of guy. So even if they push him too quickly, he still has that with him. People have compared him to Test. I think Edge, a taller Edge would be a good comparison because everyone loves Edge.
Yeah.
Even when Edge was a heel, everyone loved him. And in the tag team, him and Christian were fantastic, just like Enzo and Cass are.
My issue is, when Cass was doing that singles run, everyone was praising him for how well he was doing. And yes, he was. He held his own very well. But my issue is his theme music would hit, everyone would pop loud, they would see it's just Cass, and they would drop off. I feel like of the two, Enzo is miles more popular than Cass is. And once you split them, everyone will be like, oh, Enzo's is wrestling on main event and jobbing out to Sheamus, and Cass is in the main event, boo, we want Enzo. I don't know whether it's going to happen, but I've just got this bad feeling that Big Cass's singles push is going to be derailed by fans who are comparing him to Roman Reigns and fans that are wanting Enzo to be pushed more. Even though Enzo, logically can't be a WWE champion, but Cass logically can.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, we'll leave it there. I mean, it's something to look at for a few years down the track. And I'm actually going to make a big statement here before we move on. You might want to write this one down. Big Cass will not lose a singles match clean until the end of next year. Write that one down. Big Cass will be undefeated in singles competition until the end of 2017. I'm willing to put money on it. I mean, I won't, but I'm willing to.
We'll address it in our first podcast of 2018.
Yeah, exactly. When we have like podcast number 50 and we're up and going. Anyway, moving on to your second issue of the week.
My second issue is in regards to Shane McMahon and Brock Lesnar and whether we actually want to see a match between the two. That's sort of what they're playing at the moment. There's no indication that Shane McMahon is wanting to get someone else to wrestle. It's like, oh yeah, I'm ready to take him on. Oh yeah, we got unfinished business. So no one wants to see it.
Yeah.
It's not. It's going to be what we expect it to be. Shane McMahon will get suplexed 30 times. He'll get suplexed off the top rope. He'll get suplexed off the top of Hell in a Cell. He'll get suplexed off the top of a building. He'll get suplexed out of an aeroplane. He'll just take all these ridiculous bumps, and it'll just be, like Randy Orton was, a glorified job. Except not even that glorified, because it's Shane McMahon and he's an authority figure rather than a wrestler. We love Shane McMahon, and Brock Lesnar is a pretty good wrestler. It's not a marketable thing. You don't want to see headlining whatever it may be, Royal Rumble, or if we see it at WrestleMania, we're in big trouble. But the only possible thing that's just occurred to me is Goldberg. Goldberg comes in and represents Shane, and something like that has to happen for it to be anywhere near intriguing, because you can't market Shane McMahon versus Brock Lesnar as a match to build a pay-per-view around.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
I agree. And if you look at Shane's match against The Undertaker, it was the same thing. It was a 30-minute spot fest. Like, the match itself was actually really boring. If you're looking at it without the hype, it was a boring match. And this would be worse, because Undertaker was one thing, but Lesnar won't let Shane knock him down.
No.
Things like that. So it would probably end up being like a no DQ match, and Shane will have to get offense in that way. But if you look at Lesnar, when was the last time he actually had a good match? You'd probably have to go back to the triple threat with Rollins and Cena.
Yep.
He hasn't.
And that was fantastic.
That was. And his match with Reigns at WrestleMania, that was also fantastic. The reason was because it wasn't a suplex, F5, end of match, which Lesnar's matches have devolved into. You look back at his matches with like guys like Angle back 10 years ago. You look at matches against CM Punk. That's probably one of my favorite matches of all time. It wasn't just, a spot fest of suplexes and Lesnar, he can't be knocked down, he's a beast. I want the Brock Lesnar back that it was putting on fantastic matches. Not the one that's, like, doesn't want to sell for anyone. The one who doesn't want to take any damage like he did against Ambrose at WrestleMania. Or Ambrose described him as lazy. And the match against Orton, it had an interesting ending. But the match itself was the same thing. It was just suplex. Oh, there's an RKO on the table. End of match. That was it. Like, there was nothing to it. A Shane McMahon match would just be the same thing. It would just be spots. So, yeah, it would have to be Goldberg represents Shane, or Goldberg spears Lesnar and Shane pins him. But even that, like...
You can't have Shane McMahon beating Brock Lesnar.
No.
And it just doesn't make sense. Goldberg has to get involved, and even then, I don't want it to be as part of a Shane McMahon, Brock Lesnar storyline.
Yeah.
You'd rather see a Brock Lesnar Goldberg storyline.
And the issue is, who on the SmackDown roster, if Shane was going to pick someone to represent him, who could he pick to represent him?
A newly crossed Cesaro.
That would be the best match possible. Cesaro and Lesnar would be a fantastic match. And now I'll go into my final issue of the day, and that's regarding Daniel Bryan and what he's said over the last couple of weeks. He's made a couple of big statements. I'm not talking about the Miz thing, completely separate to that. On Michael Cole's sit-down podcast, he called Randy Orton the best, most skilled professional wrestler he's ever been in the ring with. I think that's a massive statement coming from someone like Daniel Bryan, who's been in the ring with everybody. Quickly, what are your thoughts on that?
It's pretty strange to say. Randy Orton has been a legend already, and he's still only 35, 36. I'm not sure if that's part of the storyline to try and build him up as versus Bray Wyatt, because Daniel Bryan, has a history with Bray Wyatt, or it's a huge rap for Randy Orton. But you take his words and you believe him, but that's only to an extent. I don't quite think Randy Orton would be the best wrestler. I mean, Daniel Bryan's gone in the ring with some of the best in the world.
Yeah, but I guess he was saying it on Talking Smack, and everything said on Talking Smack seems to be real. It seems to feel like a real show.
Blending.
And if Bryan says that he thinks Orton is the most skilled wrestler that he's ever been in the ring with, I guess who are we to argue with Daniel Bryan?
Oh yeah, we're certainly nobody.
Exactly. So my issue this week revolves around something else he said on Michael Cole's sit-down podcast, which was that Finn Balor, when he got injured because of the fact that each wrestler has a certain amount of bumps they can take in their career. And Balor is 35, 36, 35, and he's taken a lot of bumps in NXT, and Bryan believes that he should have been called up from NXT a year ago. And he says that because Balor was a world-renowned performer. He'd made a name for himself in NXT, and then he should have been called up. Guys like Itami, guys like Dillinger, Joe, Nakamura, Bobby Roode, The Revival, all of these guys are ready to come up to the main roster, but they can't because NXT is still a brand that needs to flourish. My issue is that I agree with Brian. I feel like guys like Nakamura, Joe, Dillinger especially, they need to be called up now because it's not like the rosters have too much depth. They've split the brands. SmackDown is really struggling in its mid-card. And if you look at the rest of the roster, Raw could use depth, SmackDown could use depth, especially with like the cruiserweights coming in. You really feel like NXT has done its job and it needs to go back to being what it was in 2014 when it first established itself. Now it's basically just the home of the best indie wrestling in the world. It needs to be a developmental brand. So you need guys like Joe, Nakamura. They need to come to the main roster to fill the obvious depth spots there. Guys like Dillinger and Aries and The Revival, they would have massive roles if you put all four of them on SmackDown. They need to be there. And then you put guys like TM61, you build them up as the next big thing. You build up the Authors of Pain, who are exactly what NXT should be. And then you go back to, like, what I mean is, if you go back to, say, 2014, and you look at what NXT was, it was Sami Zayn, Neville, Corey Graves, guys like these at the top of the card, who were, like, the indie wrestlers who could put on 5-star matches. And then you had guys like Tyler Breeze, who was pushing his way in there, and they were building him up, which is exactly what they should have done, because he was a developmental property creation. Then you have guys like Bull Dempsey and Baron Corbin and other guys like that who were pushed up from nowhere because they were home built into the developmental brand. And then all of a sudden guys like Kevin Owens come in and they feel like megastars because there's only one or two of them, rather than the entire brand being this megastar of indie wrestlers, which is why Austin Aries got no reaction, because everyone's like, oh yeah, it's great that he's here, but we've got AJ Styles, we've got Shinsuke Nakamura, we've got Samoa Joe. So my point is that these NXT guys need to be on the main roster yesterday, because there's only a certain amount of bumps they can take, and the longer you wait, the less useful they will be to the main roster. I think Brian has a fantastic point in that regard.
And all those guys you mentioned are mid to late 30s as well, so, I mean, it's still in the prime of a career, but not when you're in NXT. You've got to go up there. You can use guys like at live events and guys we've seen sporadically on NXT. You have Tucker Knight, who I think he's a big guy. Yep. But he's real agile. He could be something in the future. You've got guys like Hugo Knox, Tino Sabatelli is one of the guys we've seen on Breaking Ground.
Yep.
You've got those sorts of guys, and going back to the cruiserweight division, a couple of those guys, I know you're saying indie darlings, but if you have two of them, put two of them on NXT, just to, Noam Dar could be a star on NXT, build him up.
Exactly.
He's only 22. Even if you gave Cedric Alexander 6 months on NXT, where he could prove himself to be just fantastic, you could have kept Apollo Crews there longer as well. So you've got that's a big issue that they have got, and they really need to take advantage of the popularity that these guys will bring to the main roster, especially our man, or my man at least, Ty Dillinger.
I love Ty Dillinger, but I think if we're going to sum up a solution for this issue, I would have Nakamura stay on NXT until he drops the title. Then you bring up Joe right now, and he goes to SmackDown. I would also put Ty Dillinger and The Revival on SmackDown. You have Austin Aries on Raw to add some depth there, and because I guess he could probably also work with the cruiserweights. That's how I would split it. That adds so much depth to both rosters. Then you can have guys like Gargano and Ciampa coming up to the cruiserweight division, Rich Swann, Lince Dorado, and then you can have guys like Grand Metalik. I would have Cedric Alexander on NXT, Brian Kendrick on Raw, and you could add this new depth through the cruiserweights to NXT without forcing these seasoned veterans like Joe and Nakamura to be in NXT for too long and their bodies just to wear out there before they can make Vinnie Mac all that money.
And Vinnie Mac loves all that cash.
God. Okay. Anyway, we'll leave it there for this week. There are our 4 issues. We'll keep an eye on our Book City for this week. It's been a massive week in professional wrestling, and we hope you've enjoyed the Glorious Wrestling podcast for this week. Dem, thank you for being here.
Thank you as always, Nick.
And we hope you enjoyed this episode. Next week we've got a bit of a cool treat for you, so stay tuned for that.